Well, welcome to this webinar on porn proofing our kids. And for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Elizabeth Urbanowicz, and I run Foundation Worldview, which is a ministry that is designed to equip adults with the skills that they need to get our kids to carefully evaluate every idea that they encounter and understand the truth of the biblical worldview. Now, if you're attending this webinar today, I assume that you already know to a certain degree that pornography is a huge problem in our culture and that it's especially harmful to children. Research has found that when children are exposed to pornography in these formative stages of their life, when their brains are still developing, that porn exposure is very destructive, to the development of a child's brain. Research has also found, that the average age of exposure for children is 8 years old. And by the time they're in 5th grade, 90% of boys will have been exposed to pornography. For those of you who are familiar with me, you know that my background is in education. And I spent the first decade of my career as a teacher in a Christian school, a great Christian school just outside of Chicago. And I was teaching 3rd grade. And even in this wonderful Christian school, I had experiences where a parent would come to me and say, my child was over so-and-so's house this weekend and he exposed my son to pornography. So even at this sweet little Christian school where I was teaching, there was this issue in 3rd grade. And so as parents and Christian educators and church ministry leaders, we can't wait to be reactive. We really have to be proactive in helping our children avoid addiction to pornography. There's that old saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's what we're really going to try to focus on today. How can we actually prevent these type of addictions in our children? So the format that we're going to take is, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a dive into looking at, what is pornography and why is it harmful, just so that we make sure that we have an understanding of that. And once we've done that, then we're going to look at, what are some safeguards that we can have in our homes and in our schools and in our ministries, to make sure that we're doing what we can so that the kids in our care are not, eventually addicted to pornography. And then we're going to look at how can we help our kids see the beauty of God's good design? How can we help them see the beauty of God's good design? And now I'm so excited for this webinar because I will not be doing it alone. Here to help me today discuss this topic is my dear, dear friend, Hillary Ferrer. So Hillary, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Love anytime I get to be with you, Liz.
Yes, it's so fun. So Hillary and I were actually roommates one summer at Biola when we were both in the Masters of Apologetics program. So, and then have just continued developing a friendship from here on out. Okay, so let's just get started. And for those of you who aren't aware, the reason I have Hillary on is not just because she's a dear friend, but she also wrote a book called Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. And for those of you who are signed up for the Foundation Worldview Book Club, this was our book for recommendation for adults in February. And so Hillary has done a lot of research onto different topics of, just what's going on in our culture. And one whole chapter in that book is devoted to pornography. And so Hillary, as we dive into this, I think it's always helpful for us just to define our terms. So when we say pornography, what are we actually talking about?
So this is funny. There was a judge, I think back in the 70s, where they were trying to define what obscene material was. And he has the famous quote, "I can't define it, but I know it when I see it." And so like a lot of times it's hard to really put a definition. In my opinion, it would be anything that is portraying sex acts for the pleasure of people who are watching. So I think that we have a lot of, you have these ranges of something called soft porn, which is really might be some of the things that you see in movies. And then you have harder porn, which is where they're depicting the actual actions. You're seeing the body parts, you're seeing the mechanisms and the movements and the sounds and the everything for extended periods of time. And so I don't think we can even just limit pornography just to things that are labeled pornography.
Right.
You can have pornographic books, like the one that was such a big deal several years ago.
50 Shades of Grey.
Oh God, 50 Shades of Horror. Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey. Which fun fact, when I saw that on the at Walmart, I made sure to move the stack and put it right next to Jesus Calling. It's like
for a little conviction there.
And see the other one. Yeah, so it's like that can be pornographic because it's creating these mental images in your head, and all these mental images have the same thing in common, that they are not real situations. They're usually an exaggerated version of what is happening in real life. They give unrealistic expectations of what to expect. And I would say there are so many guys and girls that when even if they do save themselves for marriage, they get in there and it's not like it is in the movies. There isn't swelling music in the background. And it affects what they see as being normal. And speaking of normal, pornography, I think one of the things isn't just portraying that sex act, but it is portraying almost like an ever increasing level of, unfortunately, violence is either violence or perversion that you'll see. Because what happens is when with any addiction, you start out with something that's titillating and it releases that dopamine in you. After a while, your body stops responding to that level of dopamine. And so what you do is you have to, kick it up a notch, and then kick it up a notch, and then kick it up a notch. I've seen articles that are not written by Christians, that are written in like New York Times, of journalists who are finally coming to the conclusion that, hey, maybe consent isn't the highest level of what we need to be doing. Because what they're finding is girls now who are trying to date guys that have been in porn culture don't even realize it. And we're just going to lay it all out here for you, Mama Bears. So, and Papa Bears that are here, we're not going to mince words because you knew what you were signing up for. But girls don't feel like they have permission to say no to choking. And the guys are convinced that the girls enjoy being choked during sex. But because the girls feel like they consented to the sex because they would feel rude or impolite or hurt the guy's feelings if they said no, they don't say no when there's that escalating violence. And this is what we're seeing, just the repercussions in the real world. So that definition of porn, it's going to be an unrealistic, it's going to be a depiction of a sex act. It can be in words, it can be in pictures, or it can be in moving pictures, the movies. It can be
I think that's
or not.
And I think that's so important for us to understand, because we need to understand what we're talking about if we're going to help, prevent our kids from getting ensnared in this. That we're not just talking about, like, yes, obviously hardcore violent porn, we want to help our kids avoid addiction to that, but we're also talking about things like soft porn or just nude pictures. I mean, I think, fortunately, like, indoor malls don't really exist anymore, but when they did, I think we could categorize the Victoria's Secret pictures, as pornography. And so I think it's important for us to know, like, what we're talking about and what we're wanting to help our kids avoid. And you hit on this a little bit in what you were saying, but one of the things that I found really fascinating about the chapter in your book on pornography is you kind of go into a little bit of the brain chemistry and what's going on. And so you talked about the dopamine and, like, the dopamine receptors. So can you kind of just walk us through a little bit from, actually like a brain chemistry perspective, what is going on in someone's brain when they're viewing pornography?
Yeah. So we see the same thing happen in social media and stuff. So dopamine is going to be the first one. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical. And so I'll give you an example of an experiment that's been done on mice, where they actually had an electrode in a male rat's brain that would stimulate the pleasure center where dopamine is released. And he had the option of pushing a lever that would give him food, or pushing a lever that would give him a shock to that pleasure center. He pushed that lever to the pleasure center until he died.
Wow.
It's like, we'll see it in the animal kingdom. They would rather die than stop that process. So this is, and there's a lot of good things that dopamine can come from, eating a food that you really like, or going on a roller coaster, or petting a really fluffy dog, and, being with your friends, playing tag. All these things are dopamine receptors. The Lord gave us this beautiful chemical in our body to where when we are experiencing pleasurable things, we feel this sense of pleasure. Like, how boring would it be if we just couldn't experience fun and experience pleasure? And I like how in the Screw Tape Letters, where it's talking about C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, he's talking the senior demon to the junior demon, and he says that when we're dealing with pleasure, we're on the enemy's ground. And by the enemy, from the demon, the enemy actually means God, that God is the originator of pleasure. So that's the first one we need to see. This is why we see kids getting addicted to social media, because every time they hear that ding, or they see that someone has commented, or they see that someone has liked, it releases that dopamine that keeps them coming back for more. But then we're going to have two chemicals that are specific for bonding, which are oxytocin and vasopressin. And so oxytocin, for any woman who has had a baby, I know you and I talking to all these parents, and we're like, we don't have kids. From what I've heard, like the moment that they have that baby and they lay it on their chest, that it's like there is this different creature that is created in that mother that wouldn't says, I would not do. I would. There's nothing I wouldn't do for this child. That bonding is oxytocin. So what the body is intended to do is this oxytocin and this vasopressin are intended to bond people together. And these chemicals are released during orgasm. And I can't remember the exact studies. They are not released in the same amount in men as they are in women, which is why we see that men seem to be able to flit around from woman to woman more than women do. But this is supposed to be a chemical that bonds for life. This isn't supposed to be a temporary chemical. So what we have is when people are engaging in porn and they're stimulating themselves onto orgasm, they are actually creating this bonding chemical. But what they're bonding to is a screen, or they're bonding to this idea of this fake situation. Or we have lots of situations where porn stars have stalkers because the person has bonded themselves to actor, actress, to the point of where they can't let go. And for the ones that want to try all sorts of different actors and actresses watching, what it's doing is the body's training itself to make this bond and then to break this bond. And so at that point, this is, I think Amy put this in the chapter about how people say, oh, I can't imagine being with the same person for the rest of their life. They think the people who are monogamous are the ones in bondage, when in fact, they are lamenting how broken they are, that they are incapable of forming this bond with another human being anymore. And this is where I think we also get all these concepts of sexual activity with soul ties. This is, becoming one, these chemicals that are being released. And if kids don't understand the whole spiritual ramifications, we should be able to talk to them about the physiological ramifications, because no one's going to say, yeah, I would love to not be able to bond as well, or I want to not be interested in sex with a real girl, or I'm not going to be able to have sex with a real girl, because once you've trained yourself to be sexually stimulated by a screen version of a girl, we're finding like lots and lots of men, sometimes even in their teens, a lot of them in their 20s, are having erectile dysfunction, meaning they can't get it up if they want to be with a real person. In fact, reading this book, I had a doctor who's an ER doctor, I think, that said, after I read that chapter, I thought, holy cow, that's why I'm seeing all these cases coming in. He has he'd been wondering why he was having all these young guys that were asking for Viagra and were saying they couldn't have sex with their spouse. And he's like, that I did not even know that was happening, that was a ramification of this. And he's like, now that I see it, like every time someone comes in with that and they're like in their 20s, I might start asking some questions about
and it's so real, because I mean, I'm not married, so I don't have any personal experience with this, but I've walked with multiple friends through this problem that, their husbands, stumbled across porn as a little boy. It created, just this addiction, and they just kept telling themselves, well, I'm not having sex with a girl, it'll be fine once I get married. And then they get married, and these women that I've been friends with are like, why are we never sexually active? Like, I'm so confused. Why can't we ever have sex? And it's just, and it's not that it's hopeless. These women have gone through a lot of
with a real person.
It is right. And they've gone through years of counseling, but it's like, for the first few years of their marriage, their sex life was destroyed because their husbands had this addiction that they didn't even realize was going to make it virtually impossible for them to have sex, with their wife. So important. And I think one thing that you highlighted that I just want to kind of like camp out on, just to make sure that everybody was really hearing, is that it's really important that we are teaching our kids not only the theological ramifications, from a biblical worldview, but showing how that actually aligns with what scientific research has found. That yes, there are, really deep spiritual ramifications. We know that for certain, from what Paul has written in the New Testament. And that also aligns with what research has found, is going on in the brain and in the body when someone is watching pornography. So I think it's so important. And again, that's one thing that for those of you who haven't read this book that I just love, is it goes through both the theological and physiological, research into this topic and many others. Now, you mentioned a little bit before, Hillary, how porn is affecting both boys and girls, because a lot of times, when we think of pornography, we think like, oh, that's a male problem. And research has shown, that more males, are addicted than in comparison to females, but it by and large is not just a male problem. So can you just talk us through some of the ways that porn is affecting both males and females?
Yeah, so I would say that we've made it a guy thing, because it's like a lot of times they will have a higher sex drive than women do. But there's actually a new category of porn that's come out that's meant to be like the romantic porn. Usually the porn that the guys like to watch are the dominating and submissive, and her doing all sorts of stuff to them and making all sorts of crazy noises, that women are actually more drawn to seeing a connection between two people that it culminates in sex. And so it's like almost they're trying to have that sense of intimacy by proxy. I've seen like this is possible, and it could be because they've experienced sex with guys that are so porn addicted that they almost want to see what sex between two loving people actually looks like. And the only place that they can get that is through this own special type of porn. But secondly, the way that they're really being affected, and Amy went through a really great section in this, it's this concept of groomed to consume and groomed to perform. And this is something that's starting with our kids, that the boys are being groomed to consume, in the sense that girls start posting, pretty pictures, starts out with selfies and all this stuff. And the guys start paying attention to that. And then the guys start requesting pictures, and then they start requesting naked pictures, and then all these things. And so the girls know that if I want to be liked by guys, which every girl wants to be liked by guys, I've always heard it said that guys lust and girls lust to be lusted after. And so they're getting that dopamine rush when a guy is paying attention to them. And so they keep doing more and more and more of what the guys are wanting. But the guys are getting what they want from porn culture. So there are interviews that girls say, I have to have sex with my boyfriend to even get him to watch a movie with me.
Oh,
like she just wants to go on a date with her boyfriend, and he won't do it unless they have sex first. Or you have girls that have never had their first kiss, but they're being told that they have to perform oral sex on a guy, and that's kind of the first stages of a relationship, that he'll, try her out kind of thing. And she's never even kissed him. And so girls are, if they want to have that status among other girls, if they want to be one of the desirables, they have to then conform their behavior to perform to what those guys are wanting. And so that's probably one of the biggest cyclical things, that the more girls do that, the more guys expect that. The more guys watch these ever increasing porns, now they're putting that expectation on the girls, who now are getting in situations where they don't feel safe saying, I don't like being choked, because the guys are now convinced that that's what the girls like. And it's just this spiral of just depravity, which is why in the book, I have, like, when we're speaking in a marital context, I know for a long time people said anything that you want to do within marriage is fine. I don't think that's the case. I think sex had a specific purpose in marriage, and one of them is to reinforce those marital vows in bodily form. So when we come to things like role play, or any kind of things where someone's actually harmed, is that the kind of thing that you would say, hey, I'm on our wedding day, let's pretend that we're two teenagers that are sneaking off? Or, hey, on our wedding day, let's pretend that I left my wife back there, and now I'm coming over and I'm secretly divorcing her and getting married. You wouldn't say that on a wedding day. What you're doing is, I have put this time aside to commit to you in front of friends, family, and God. And I will love you, and I will cherish you, and I will speak tenderly to you, and I will do all these things. If you have that, and those are the vows that you made, and then in the bedroom, you're basically breaking every rule, but it's technically okay because you're breaking it with your spouse. That, I mean, we're perverting sex within marriage, even in this act as well.
Right. Because especially when we think of, like the biblical theology of sexuality and sex, that marriage is meant to be a picture of Christ and the church. And so if the sex act is part of that, like all of these things that are portrayed in pornography, I mean, how does any of that reflect the way that Jesus loves the church? Like, it doesn't. It's the complete opposite. It's nothing that Jesus has ever done, or thought of towards the church. So I love how you bring that up. We're going to move in a few minutes just over into some of the, some things about prevention. But just, you've mentioned already some of the lies, that kids, teens, and even adults believe about pornography. But are there any other lies that you and Amy found in your research, that are just really prevalent, especially among Christians, about pornography?
Well, I guess one of them would be the idea that porn is a moral alternative to sex. And in fact, the fact that there is research showing that people who are addicted to porn do have less sex. There's a lot of kids that'll be like, aha, this is how I'm going to stay pure and not have sex before I'm married. And I'm like, I think we've lost the forest for the trees here. So I'd say that's one of the ones. The idea that porn is harmless would be another one, or that porn can be empowering. If you want to see what's going on, especially like during the Women's March that happened back in, was it 2017? One of the things they marched for was sex workers' rights, this idea that this can be empowering. We even have Christian counselors whose clients are having problems in the bedroom that are recommending the couple watch porn together. And I'm sorry, but that is not okay. That is absolutely not okay. So I guess I think just within Christianity, like one of a couple of stats that really, really shocked me here was that I believe it's youth pastors. There's about 56%, I believe it's 56, of youth pastors live in constant or near constant fear of being discovered for their porn addiction. That's over half.
That's just crazy. It also, this is kind of like a slight little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's a rabbit trail I want to take for those of you watching. I would highly recommend that rather than having a youth pastor invest in your child's life, if you want another adult in the body of Christ, find an older woman or an older man who has loved the Lord for all of their life and ask them to mentor your child. Because for some reason in the church, we tend to put the most vulnerable with the least equipped. I don't know why we do that, but that stat alone should let you know that there is close to a 60% chance that the youth pastor at your church is heavily addicted to pornography. So please find someone else to mentor your child. That's usually just a general rule. But sorry, Hillary, keep going.
No, that's fine. And then the other one that was really shocking was the percentage of kids, and this is surveying all kids, not just Christian kids, but if you think about what percentage Christian kids make up on this, it was 90% of teens and 96% of young adults. So this is majority. If you've got more than 4 to 10% Christians in your community, are either neutral, accepting, or encouraging of porn consumption.
Wow.
Like, who was it? Barna did the study where it was talking about what percentage of people actually had a Christian worldview who claimed to be Christians. I think this would be one of those things where we have a lot of people claiming to be Christians. But if you look at what they actually believe, they do not believe a Christian worldview. So just thinking that your child is immune from this, oh, my child knows that, my child wouldn't do that. I think we really need to take the blinders off, because I think that's one of the things setting them up for failure, is assuming that your child isn't one of these 90 to 96% of kids.
Right. And I think it's so easy for us to do, just because when we even think about our own mental life, how many of our thoughts never come out of our mouth, and a lot of times that's a good thing, but when we're thinking
usually
about
that people can't read my thoughts.
Oh, I know. I think that's why David said, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, because man, there's a lot of sanctification that's needed on the inside of me. But just a lot of times we don't know what's going on, inside our kids' hearts. and minds. And so that's why I know, both Mama Bear Apologetics and Foundation Worldview, we're passionate not only about providing those intellectual answers, but encouraging you to make sure that you're maintaining a positive gospel-centered relationship with your child.
Yes.
Because it's not just enough to present these facts and statistics. You also have to have a relationship with your child where they're going to come to you when they have questions and concerns and when they encounter something. So we're going to transition now into our time of talking about prevention. But is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we do that, Hillary?
Yeah, there is one more thing. Or you were going to have me go through the ROAR method at one point, right?
Yeah, let's do that at the end. Would that work? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just when we think about, I mentioned before that saying an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it is so true that I'm sure there are many of you watching, who have children who are teens or young adults, and it is not too late, for you to start these conversations, for you to be involved in their lives. But we have to do so much less backpedaling when we are preventative, when we're actually proactive rather than being reactive. So I would highly encourage you, if you are working, especially if you're working with kids ages 12 on under, start having these conversations today. If you're part of the Foundation Worldview Book Club, we recommended this book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, which is for kids ages 4 to 7, that just talks about, how many good pictures there are out there and that we see, and look at all the pictures around our house, and then talking about how there's bad pictures out there. And those are pictures that show, parts of our body that really should be covered up by a bathing suit. And it gives kids a plan. If you see a bad picture, what do you do? And then for older kids, for kids 8 to 12, there's just the good pictures, bad pictures, which actually goes into a little bit more of that brain chemistry that Hillary was talking about, and just gives you questions that you can go through with your child. When I was a teacher, one of the first conversations that I would have the first week of school, it wasn't like, "Hi, I'm Miss Urbanowicz, let's talk about pornography." That's not how it went. But the first week of school, yeah, just a few. But I would always explain to my kids, we're going to be working on computers at some point throughout the year, and you probably are on your parents' phone, and you might have an iPad of your own. And you know what? There are pictures out there that are not good pictures, and there are pictures out there, there are videos out there that are also not good videos. And just went through a little bit of what good pictures, bad pictures covers. And then what I would help them understand is that they're probably going to have one of two responses when they see that one, they might feel very embarrassed and ashamed that they just saw that picture. And so they're going to be tempted to never tell anybody. Or two, they might be curious and think, I wonder if there's more of these kind of pictures or videos out there. And so I would explain to my students, you're probably going to feel either ashamed or you're going to feel curious. No matter what you feel, you should have the same response. You immediately go and tell your parents or the closest adult who you trust. You need to immediately tell someone, because when we bring this into the light, then it loses its power. Okay, that's one of the enemy's biggest tricks, that, I can handle this on my own. I just need to keep this in the darkness. And that's how crazy sin addictions happen. So I would really encourage you, even at the age of 4, just start bringing up, about good pictures and bad pictures. And this is not a one and done conversation. Now, I know for many of us, in like our 30s or 40s, our parents might not have had any of these discussions with us. So these discussions can feel very, very uncomfortable.
Well, we didn't have the internet.
So that's true. That's true. There wasn't so much need to have these discussions, about pornography.
Like, you had to go to the back part of the video store that had the cape and the neon and
yes, and the chain across. Yes, where it's so easily accessible now. So this is not a one and done conversation. So if you feel uncomfortable about this, again, check out those books. They give you just kind of like a great script to go off of, and make sure that you're just having these conversations regularly, and talk about what happens not only if you're by yourself on your iPad, but what if you're at a friend's house? Because that's, like a place, most of you watching this are probably very intentional about what your kids can see and they can't see, and where they can see screens, but your child's friends' parents might not have those same rules. So what do you do if you're at a friend's house and you and your friend accidentally bump up against a bad picture or bad video? Or what do you do if your friend shows it to you, and you feel uncomfortable and you feel this pressure? It's so important to have these conversations with them. So with what I just mentioned there, Hillary, was anything else you wanted to add to that?
I think that one of the things is practicing, and I'm going to use role play in a different sense here, practicing role play of being shown a picture. And so my husband disagrees with me on this, and that I think the the publishers didn't necessarily want to put this in the book, but I think there is a good place among guys, especially, for healthy shaming when someone is doing something like that, to where it's like guys kind of respond when they're being more sarcastic, and they can say things without feeling like they've taken a punch on their man card. So like especially if you're in your older teens, they're trying to show you something and be like, that's great, but I prefer real girls. You have fun with your fake sex over there. Just kind of a way to make it sound ridiculous, because it is. I'm trying to think of just practicing ways of saying, that looks like that should be private, kind of like, why are you wanting to watch that? And moving yourself away from it. And because what can happen a lot of times is if you have young boys or guys that are saying, oh, I have to say no to that, they're like, what, are you gay? And that's the immediate reaction. They're going to get shamed into, oh, if you don't watch this, you're gay. You got to think of positive ways to refuse that help them to feel reinforced in their masculinity, because the immediate response for their friends is going to try to emasculate them.
Emasculate.
Yeah, for not
Right.
looking at these things. And so I think that would be like some of the times to give them a permission to be a little sarcastic, practice different things to say when something like that comes up. And so that they have almost like a script in their head.
Which is so important, because in those moments, when something unexpected happens to us, it's like really hard to just grasp at straws and try to figure out what to do. Where if our kids can already have this script, even if they, kind of don't like it or might think it's a little ridiculous if they're a teen, at least they have something to say. And with little kids, with kids 10 on younger, this is more like catechizing them. We want them to think critically, but we also need to give them just statements to say, like, so, like if somebody shows them, like a bad picture or a bad video, they can say, no, I'm not going to look at that, because God made our bodies and our bodies are really special. So if we can just practice that, you can even do that when you're at the grocery store with your kids. My goodness, like think about the magazines, that are just, there's lots of bad pictures, in those magazines. And so every time we see one of those, we can say, you know what, let's say this together. We're not going to look at that, because God made our bodies and our bodies are really special. So just giving our kids these phrases that they can say to help give them an out or an exit. And obviously it'll look different for an 8-year-old than it does for an 18-year-old.
Or girls looking at their friend going, why are you showing me something that dehumanizes women? No. Or pointing out the number, one of the, oh God, I'm trying to think of the name of the ministry now. It's the New Drug, I think. Where they go through the number of women that are involved, and men that are in these things, that are being sex trafficked. It's like they are literally sex slaves. And so being like, you realize that a large percent of those are sex slaves, and you're participating in that. So no thanks.
And that's a huge part of even what makes this sinful too, that it's not only that we're taking God's good gift of sex and bonding with a screen, but we're actually dehumanizing someone else, that we're looking at a human who's an image bearer of God, and we're consuming them as if they're an object for our pleasure. That's a huge problem with this, and a problem, a secular person wouldn't say like, an image bearer and that, but saying like, this is sex slavery, this is sex trafficking, this person doesn't, most porn stars, especially females, don't really have a choice, or they've been tricked into believing that they don't have a choice.
And so being able to put it kind of in those secular terms to where it doesn't matter who you're talking to, that it just produces like that intuitive notion that, no, this is really a bad idea. This is really bad. I'm participating in something that's bad. Oh, so you like participating in sex slavery? No, thanks. And that's something that everybody can understand. Now, some people might not agree with me, because they're like, oh, you're heaping shame on someone who might already feel shame. But when it comes to protecting my kid, you know what, whatever is going to get them out without having to be bullied for it, I'm going to recommend that.
Important things to think through. And I think one thing that you mentioned in that chapter in your book that really stuck with me is you talked about helping our kids foster healthy in-person relationships. And this is something I think you guys were probably writing thinking more about teens, but I can't even say the name of our organization, at Foundation Worldview, we're focused on kids younger than teens. That's even an important skill for young kids, because especially in this age of screens, our kids sometimes don't even know how to interact with one another. It was around my 5th year of teaching, I started to have to teach my students how to make eye contact with me, smile, and say good morning. Like I didn't have to do that my first 5 years of teaching, but I started to have to actually train them and have them practice doing that. And so we need to make sure that we're helping our children foster healthy relationships with people of the same sex and people of the opposite sex. That this requires intentionality, actually having play dates when they're little,
Yes.
giving them things to do together. I noticed this in my classroom that my students, a lot of them just didn't know how to have a conversation with one another. So when they would go to the lunchroom, I would give them 2 questions that they had to ask the people at their table. And then I would actually ask them when they came back from lunch, okay, who can tell me, what somebody at your table said about this? I also started a little program that we do once a week at the end of a Monday. I just called it Monthly Mingler, and I would partner them with one other person for an entire month. And I would just give them something fun to do, like create a paper airplane or try to build a tower out of these 3 stacks of paper. Because when you have common experiences with someone, that's how you bond with them. And so just helping our young kids learn how to develop healthy relationships. And then do you have anything to add to that when we're thinking about, adolescents and teens, Hillary?
I think you need to be I think you need to get all the parents on the same page, like all your kids' friends, that there's certain no screen zones. And I think especially when you're sitting down to eating is the place that you don't have screens. And this is something that parents need to be aware of too, because how many times have we gone out to eat and we're not even talking to our spouse, we're sitting there staring at a screen. But having a bucket, hey, this is the screen bucket, everybody put it in there, because we're actually having real life conversations here. And just having them practice that and getting all the other parents on board with it as well. Because if one parent is going to say, no, I'm not going to do that, well, it's going to kind of ruin it. But if you can get parents where you're on the same page with them for the kids, I think that's also another way for fostering that. Or if you've got kids that are spending too much time together, even with kids that they know, but it's all doing video games. I know some of my nephews, it's like play video games constantly, but it's people that they know, really making a point for those in-person interactions. And I think one of the things we mentioned in the book is making your house either the house that everybody wants to go to. And I'm telling you, the way to do that with high schoolers is food. It's going to make your food bill that much higher, but they will want to go to your house. Or if you have someone who has a larger house, partnering with them, saying, I want to make your house the place that they all go because there's enough space for all of them. What can I do to help you to make this place something that they can all go to? And just everybody getting on the same page.
So, such good advice, Hillary. Okay, I want to, in a minute, transition to talking about the ROAR method, which you mentioned before, but just 2 other things I want to mention just in talking about prevention. This one, I think it should almost go without saying, but I don't think it can go without saying, is that your child should not have access to the internet in his or her bedroom. Should not.
Or the bathroom.
Kind of like, right, anywhere that's not public. Like your child should only have access to the internet in a public place. I would think that putting them, in any place where they have private access to the internet really is like putting them in a cage with a tiger. Like, it's just, why would you do it when that's so dangerous? So, don't give them unmonitored internet access. And then the other thing that's so important is don't underestimate the power of prayer in this. I mean, seriously, pray that the Lord would give you wisdom, pray that God would protect your children, not just through keeping them away from pornography, but that he would actually be at work in their hearts and their minds, that they wouldn't want this. And this is a prayer that my mom prayed all throughout our growing up years. And let me tell you, it works. My mom prayed that whenever me or my brother or my sister sinned, that we would be caught quickly and brought to repentance. And let me tell you, it works. In fact, once I was in college and post-college, whenever I started dating somebody, I was like, okay, you got to know about this prayer my mom prays, because now that we're dating, you're kind of umbrellaed into this. And I think guys would just kind of laugh until it came true and their lives started falling apart. And I was like, I told you all your secret sins were going to be exposed. So that was a prayer my mom prayed every day for us growing up. And let me tell you, it worked. So don't underestimate the power of prayer. Just as a reminder for those of you watching, we're going to transition in about 5 to 10 minutes into our time of questions. So if you have a question, we probably will not have time to get through all of them, but you can put them in the chat. And if we don't get to all of them, I usually take the questions and then answer them on our podcast. So we will hopefully get to them at some time. But the last thing, Hillary, as I already told you that I wanted to ask you to do is just kind of walk us through. You have this model called the ROAR method that you have in both of your books, your first Mama Bear Apologetics book, and then this Guide to Sexuality. Can you kind of walk us through what the ROAR method is and how parents could apply this ROAR method when they're thinking about helping their kids avoid addiction to pornography?
Yeah, so the ROAR method stands for recognize the message, offer discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and reinforce through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. So starting at the beginning to recognize the message, the main goal for recognizing the message is trying to figure out what the main message is that's coming through, or if the person, who created the video or created the song or, whatever, what message were they trying to get across? And so this is where you can say, the no judgment zone, what is the main message that's trying to be gotten across? And so even some of those messages might be lies, but as long as we can realize that this is the message that they're trying to send. Because if we get that wrong and we just import what we think they're trying to do, then people will just automatically stop listening to us and be like, well, they just don't understand. So that recognizing the message and accurately defining it first is super duper important. The next step is offering discernment. So when you offer discernment, that is not going and pointing out everything that's wrong with something. Like I know a lot of places that call themselves discernment ministries, and basically all they do is they want to point out everything that's wrong with everything and never say anything nice about anything. And which, there's a place for identifying lies, but if that's all we're doing, that's, I call it being like the food critics, or just the critics in general. You're not making anything yourself. You're just tearing down what everybody else has. So offering discernment, I do this little hand gesture with parents that I want to say that the most potent lies are wrapped in partial truths. And so most everything we're going to come across is going to be a mixture of lies and truth, good and bad. Our job is to separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. And this is something you can teach to a kid as young as 4 with any kind of idea. Oh, we saw this in the movie. Okay, it's going to be a mixture of good and the bad. What were some of the good things about the movie that we can affirm? And maybe sometimes they're even going to say something where you're like, no, that wasn't really good. But, let's find the things we can affirm, separate it from the lies that we saw sneak in. Then we're going to accept the good, reject the bad. This is where we also really need to understand where the people are coming from. What were their motivations? What problem are they maybe identifying that we haven't properly identified? There's a lot of stuff that can go into finding what we agree on. And if you want to have productive conversations with people, you want to first start out with where you agree, because then they're more willing to listen to, but hey, but what about this lie that I saw here? What about this lie? And you don't have to say this is a lie, but you say, well, what about this aspect? I'm not sure if I agree with that. What do you think about that? And it's going to help them actually go through that discernment process, because biblical discernment, it talks about being able to distinguish between what is good and what is not. And as Elisa likes to say, sometimes you're looking at what's true versus what's almost true. And that can be even more confusing. Argue for a healthier approach is we've now gone through this process, separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. Now we're going to take the good things that we've identified and say, how does the Bible actually address this? So how, it could be I've identified a problem that the church has ignored. Yeah, you're right. That is a problem. Now we might differ on what we think the correct solution is, but let's talk about how the Bible addresses this problem. Does the Bible even speak on this problem? And more often not, it does. It addresses these problems. So we're going to look at solutions from a biblical worldview. So this is what you're doing with your kids, and then the reinforce through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. You want to talk through why we believe that the Bible says this. Just have more conversations, point things out. The discipleship aspect is pointing things out in real time. When you see something on a show, you can put it on pause. When you see something really nonsensical, like follow your heart on a throw pillow at some kind of craft fair, you can be like, well, what if my heart's telling me to run out in the middle of the street? What if my heart says that you can make up all sorts of ridiculous things, have fun. It'll just aid in laughter, but it gets the point across. So that's kind of that discipleship aspect. And then prayer. Ideological things need to be fought from an ideological perspective, but spiritual strongholds need to be fought from the perspective of spiritual battle. And that only takes place on your knees. So if I were going through the ROAR method for pornography, I'll just say some of the things that we noticed. So recognizing the message, like what is the message that porn itself is telling us? And the number one is that women are always in the mood for sex. Like I point out this scene from Friends where the guys had gotten like a fuzzy porn channel, and they just like wouldn't stop watching it. And then they were shocked when the bank teller didn't want to have sex with them, or the pizza girl just took his money and left. And they're like, what's wrong with them? And they finally have this silence, and they're like, maybe we should turn off the porn. But this concept that women are always in the mood for sex, that women enjoy being degraded and treated like sex objects. The amount of violence against women that takes place in porn, and just violence in general, sometimes not even against women. There's a certain classes that I left out of this. I didn't go and watch a bunch of porn, but I had to read about a lot of these things,
right?
Where they're actually hurting animals, or just hurting other people. Yeah, it was really depraved. And saying that people enjoy this, and this is okay. That porn sex is normal sex. You have a large percentage of kids who think that what they see in porn is what sex is actually like. And they don't realize it's not until they start getting into a sexual relationship. And at that point, they start trying to imitate what they've seen in the porn. Now, the offer of discernment on this, I don't think I can stress enough. This was the point that I wanted to bring up earlier, that I said, we'll wait till the war section. And this is, I think, a number one thing that we need to remember if we are having someone who is dealing with a porn addiction. And that is, a lot of times, porn addiction comes from someone who's trying to meet a legitimate need in an illegitimate way.
Right.
That if we only focus on the porn addiction, we're missing what's going on. There was a girl that I knew. Well, actually, I didn't know her at all. It was this other ministry leader that just kind of passed her off to me, because he's like, I don't know. He's like, I've been talking to this woman and she's addicted to lesbian porn, so I gave her name. And then he had a smiley face.
Thank you.
I'm like, I know this girl. So I was like, okay, I guess this one's my assignment right now. So I started up conversations with her, and I was kind of asking, why she felt drawn to that. And I asked her, do you think it's wrong to crave intimacy with another woman, or just to create bonding or closeness with another woman? She's like, yeah. I said, no, that's not wrong. It's wrong to crave sexuality. But she had no friends. She had no family, and she was craving that bond so badly that the only way she could kind of feel bonded to someone was through this process. And I've heard this being a thing with women a lot. Now, sometimes we'll have married men that have never been involved in sex, and maybe they have an overly domineering wife and they don't know how to escape. And so at this point, instead of standing up and saying, this is not okay that you're treating me this way, they start watching porn where women are degraded. It's almost like a way of getting back at what they see as a problem. It's this real tangential way, but there's some legitimate need that is being met in an illegitimate way. And I would say, whenever we're dealing with someone who has a porn addiction, now again, like, I saw some people that were talking about, I don't agree with the snarky comments. I think there's a time and a place, and I think there's certain personalities that work for. I don't think it's across the board. But if someone, that's when someone's just trying to show you stuff, trying to entice you. If you have someone who legitimately has a problem with this, it is good to start kind of probing for what kinds of things they feel are lacking in their life. And a lot of times that's going to be a feeling of safety and security. It's going to be a feeling of disappointment. I've heard so many stories from men that they feel like a disappointment in their jobs, or like they have no control in their jobs. And the only time they feel like they are man enough is when they are engaging in self-stimulation with pornography, because it's like they can pretend that this woman is responding to them, this beautiful woman. So really being able to see the hurt behind the addiction, the fuel for the addiction, that is one of the things that I would say we can offer discernment on that. And that's one of the things we need to identify, that those desires themselves are not wrong.
And that's something I think it's really important, even if we're talking with little kids, like that the desire to be close with someone, the desire to be a good friend, the desire to one day be married, the desire to have sex, those are really, really good desires. And then we just talk about how are those desires met in legitimate ways,
Yeah.
because if we're not careful about that and helping our kids see that there are
Mhm.
God-given, God-honoring, beautiful ways of meeting these desires, the sexual ones, are only to be fulfilled within the marriage covenant, but the
Mhm.
desire for relational intimacy, like I'm not married, but I've heard from married people that their spouse does not fill all of their relational needs. We all need relational intimacy within the body of Christ. So those are
Yeah.
really important things. So Hillary, if you could just walk us really quick through the A and the R, and then we'll head into our time of questions.
Yep. So the lies that went in were porn is not that big of a deal. Porn is a moral alternative to sex, and porn is harmless, which we already talked about. Porn can be empowering, and porn can promote healthy sexuality when we were talking about the so those are some of the lies. Oh, and that porn can be ethical. There's this buzz thing of ethically sourced porn where you can guarantee that this wasn't a sex slave. But if you can honestly show me some girl whose childhood desire it was to be a sex performer, who doesn't have some story of rejection and abuse and stuff like that in her background, this like super healthy girl that just wanted to be a sex object, like, please introduce me to her. Arguing for a healthier approach is we're going to be looking at, like you said, what are these true desires and how can we have these desires met in a legitimate way? Porn hijacks real needs and seduces the individual with the promises of fulfilling them. So when we talk about being close with people, we can talk about all the different types of fellowship. We can look at C.S. Lewis's Four Loves. And that's one of the things that's disappearing in teen culture right now is the category of friendship love. In fact, if you notice in the things that are going around, like the genderbread person or the gender unicorn or the gender whatever that's teaching you all these things, friendship has been replaced by the term romantic attraction. It's like where they define it as wanting to be close to someone and have conversations and go out and do things together. I'm like, that's what you do with friends. Like, why? But they say go on dates. I'm like, you want to hang out with them because you're emotionally attracted to them. That's called friendship. So just reaffirming these desires that they have, or if they're lonely and they feel out of control, this is something that they can bring to God. And this is something they can bring to mom and dad to talk about and find ways of, why am I feeling unhealthy or unsafe? Why am I feeling unseen? And the desire to be seen and the desire, all these desires are good. How does the Bible address having these? And then reinforcing this through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. And we say, first off, there's not going to be any filter that's foolproof. Kids know how to, they can run circles around us with technological stuff, but, especially at the younger ages, it is good. So I've heard that ones like Net Nanny, Safe Eyes, Covenant Eyes, and Bark. I've heard the most about Bark. I don't know it very well. I haven't had to install it on any of my devices. So, but these are things that you can do. As far as smartphones, I really, really recommend Gab phone or Gab watch. It doesn't allow them, it can give the illusion of having a smartphone or a smartwatch, but it doesn't allow them access to the internet. There's 25 pre-programmed in phone numbers that they are allowed to call, and they can still send pictures with those pre-programmed phone numbers. So it's like they can not have to be like the weirdo in the class that doesn't have a phone or doesn't have a watch, but they are able to have this in a safe environment. We talked earlier about no phones or computers in the bedroom or the bathroom, anywhere where they can be by themselves. That is going to be an immediate, that's going to be an immediate thing. Now, this is one of the problems where kids will say, well, I need my phone for my alarm.
There's such a thing as an alarm clock. It still
Yes,
exists,
I know.
and
It was
Walmart has a whole ton of them
that we had when we were young. And the only time it didn't work was when all the power went out and it started up at 12 o'clock. But a lot of them, you'll have ones that even if the power goes out,
battery backup.
Yep. So it's like, this isn't an unsurmountable problem. There are other solutions. And then preparing your kids for what to do if they actually see a pornographic image, like we talked about. And so for the ones who felt really uncomfortable with saying something snarky, I really kind of like Clay Jones's approach, where he talks about, you will start living the exciting Christian life, where someone says, hey, let's go see, this movie, and be like, no, I've read reviews on that, and it sounds like it's got basically a bunch of porn, and I don't think that's glorifying to God. And he's like, and you will start living the exciting Christian life. Pornography, you're not going to watch that.
Yeah, well,
Or
I think
just
those things that you mentioned, that for those of you who are watching, if you haven't read the Mama Bear books, that roar method, one thing that I love about that is that's something that's transferable that you can apply in any and every situation. In this one, we're talking about pornography. And I think it's just a great paradigm that you can use with your children anytime you're faced with something, that is not biblical, to really help them think, just like Hillary gave that example of the hands, what are the parts that are good that we're going to accept and the parts that are, not true that we're going to spit out. So we're going to transition into a time of questions. Now, we usually always stop on the hour just to be respectful of people's time. That would only leave us with 3 minutes to answer questions. So we're probably, just as an FYI, we're probably going
sorry,
to
I'm
go
a
about
chatty
10.
Cathy.
No, it's okay. We're probably going to go about 10 minutes over. But for those of you who are like, I only booked off an hour and I have a meeting, you will be sent a link to this recording so you can go back and watch the last 10 minutes later. So no feelings of guilt if you have to leave, but we'll probably go about 10 minutes late just so we can get through some of these questions. So the first question is an interesting one. It says, how does classical art fit into nudity? My daughter has been exposed to Michelangelo's David as well as other classical pieces in her art class. Would this be classified as porn? So Hillary, give us your thoughts first and then I'll jump in.
So I would say that this is one of those kind of gray areas where I don't know why they painted everybody naked back then. Like that was like this thing that everybody got painted naked. And I think it wasn't as much meant to sexually, like I've never looked at many of those and been like, hubba, hubba, turned on by what I was seeing. Now, granted, I'm not a boy. All he does is see boobs and he's like, oh. But they were trying to glorify the human form. They were actually trying to elevate the beauty of God's design. And so I think in you need to know your kid's personality in the sense of what will actually turn them on and what won't. That I think that there is something to be, in the garden, we were naked and unashamed. There is something beautiful about the human form. Yeah, I would call this more of an area of conviction rather than an area of command. That I don't think that those would be classified as pornographic because the purpose of them was never to sexually titillate anybody, and it was to glorify the human form. But again, I would say go with your convictions on that one, because the Lord knows your heart. He knows the heart of your kids, and he knows what they can handle and what's going to plant a seed and what doesn't plant a seed.
Yep. Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with that, with what Hillary just said, that it is a gray area. You have to be prayerful about it. Go with your convictions. Make sure you know your child. And for those who do not have, strong convictions about that, like you said, Hillary, looking at David is very different than looking at, like a Maxim magazine cover, because the purpose there is like, look at this woman and desire her, where, like forms that were sculpted as nude, it wasn't designed with the purpose of creating lust, but looking at like, okay, let's look at God's good design for the human body. But for some people, they will be convicted. And if you are convicted, like it says in Romans 14, that whatever is not of faith is sin. So you have to be careful with that. Okay, next question says, would you recommend an internet filter in our home setting? So Hillary, you mentioned some of those. Could you just go through those again, some of the ones that you mentioned?
I always recommend an internet filter, knowing that your kids are going to figure out ways around them. But yeah, like hold on, I got to find the chapter again. Because again, this isn't something that we have on our computers, but Net Nanny, Safe Eyes, Covenant Eyes, Bark. So one of the ones that I do know about Covenant Eyes is that it will send a list of anything that you have, any website that you have gone to. It will send it to the person of your choice so that they can look through. So if you have something like that with your kids and just say, they can't delete their search history, anything you go to, it's going to send me a list of it. And so that's where you're just kind of having that accountability and you can actually see what's going on. Some things are good with blocking, like I think Bark, but sorry. But yeah, those are some of the ones that we had heard of when we were going through the book. I think Amy did more research on that than I did, but yeah, so those are some options.
Okay, thanks, Hillary. Okay, next one. I really like this one. So what resources can we use to help kids practice conversation skills? So I love this one. This is one I'm passionate about. So I have a few things I'll recommend, then I'll pass it over to Hillary. So the most practical thing that I think helps kids with conversation is you modeling it well. So What I would recommend is start practicing biblical hospitality in your home. Open up your home both to those in your body of Christ and those in your neighborhood. Even if it's just once a month, start having a family or a couple or a single person over. Prepare a meal. Doesn't have to be fancy. Your home doesn't have to be all picked up. We have a whole webinar on practicing biblical hospitality with Rosaria Butterfield. But start practicing biblical hospitality. And before the person or the couple or the family comes over, brainstorm with your kids. What are some good questions we can ask Mr. So-and-so? Or what are some good questions we can ask Miss So-and-so? And think through those questions and then model for them what it looks like to have a healthy conversation. And then when you have dinner at your own home, just with your own family, practice that as well. And if you're not having dinner together most nights of the week, that's something that you should do. It's something that research has shown is one of, the really strong bonding points. So that's something I really recommend. Then there's an activity that I recommend all the time just to practice active listening. You just get a tennis ball, or if your kids have problems chucking tennis balls at people's heads or other things, get a soft cush ball. And then sit across the sit across the room from your child, or have your children sit across the room from one another, and just have questions in a hat and have them pull out one question and ask it to the person who's seated across from them. Roll the ball across the room. The person with the ball catches it, answers the question, and rolls it back to the questioner. Then the questioner says, "So what I heard you say is," and they rephrase what they heard them say and then says, "Is that right?" Roll the ball back, and the person either says, "Yep," and then they pull a question out of the hat, or they say, "No, that's not what I was saying at all. What I was trying to say is," and they rephrase it. And then, back and forth until they get it right. So those are just some really practical things to help your kids with conversations. And Hillary.
Can I say something to that? That I know a lot of couples that are in couples counseling for their marriages, and they're having to do this. They're not rolling the ball back and forth, but this is something that these couples that have been married for years do not know how to have a conversation where they can accurately describe what the person said. They will always take, well, when you said this, you meant this, and then do that. And so, but having to practice saying, is this what you were saying? This isn't just for little kids. This is for adults. This will help your marriage.
Yes. Yep. So we can practice this as well. What a bonus if we're helping our kids develop conversations and we're helping to get to know our spouse better.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. We kind of answered this one, but we'll go through it again. When should we start talking with our kids about pornography? Which age? And so I recommend the age 4 and start off with good pictures, bad pictures. I mean, it's a book. Just read it over and over and over and over and over again and keep having these conversations with your kids. If you want to start at 3, if you have a really smart 3-year-old, you can even start the conversation at 3. Did you have anything
Nope,
to add?
I would say that was a great answer.
Okay. Next question. Is there a connection between introducing romance, even innocent romance in movies and books at a young age, i.e. Disney animated movies, etc., and a child's interest in romantic relationships / dating, sex, or porn? Interesting
Great
one.
question.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think that male-female romance is something that should be normalized in the sense that this is part of being human. And now there are people who are called to singleness, and they glorify God in their singleness, and it's not a better state of being or a lesser state of being. Paul would even say sometimes it's a greater state of being. But I would say a majority of people are going to be married at some point, and so that you can always take something good and have someone be preoccupied with it in an unhealthy way. I think I was one of those ones where even the romance in the cartoons probably preoccupied me in an unhealthy way. I was so obsessed. I mean, I couldn't wait to get married, and the Lord just did not even give me a boyfriend until I was like in my 20s. And I think that was his grace saving me from all sorts of heartache and all sorts of bad things. But I think that that marriage, as it is pointing towards our final destination, our final eternity of being one with Christ as the body of the church, not us individuals, but the body of Christ with Christ. Anything that points towards that. Now, if it's something where it's just showing romance with really no commitment, no interest in anything, it's just like, this is my friend that I like to make out with, well, then maybe that's not the best thing. But I think I think romance is part of what it means to be human. And so
Yeah, I would agree that I think, and the model you gave before, like about putting your hands like
Mhm.
this and like what is good, that we're going to
Yes.
keep and what is not true, that we're going to reject. I think we can have great conversations with Disney movies about that. Like what
Yeah.
is good about this? Is it good when a man and a woman fall in love? Well, I mean, yes, it is. It's part of God's good design and marriage. Like if at the end of the movie they get married, that's something that we should celebrate. That's something we
Mhm.
should be excited about. What are like some not good parts of this? Well, if we think that that's all that life is about,
Yes.
that the
Mhm.
whole purpose of our life is to grow up and to fall in love and get married, well, that's not a good thing, because let's look at what scripture has to say,
Mhm.
about our purpose in life, that our purpose is to be reconciled to God and then to be conformed more into the image of Jesus. And a lot of times that involves marriage and
Mhm.
romance, and those are such good things. But just to have our kids, think through that critically. And then kind of like you mentioned, Hillary, thinking about, I know a lot of times Christians kind of like poo-poo fairy tales. It's like, oh, it's
Mhm.
just too much focus on romance. And of course it can be. But when you
Yeah.
think about it, every good story reflects the heart of the greatest story that God is
Yes.
writing in,
Mhm.
in the universe. And, there is a princess, this female that has been lost and has been fallen and
You're
is
channeling Clay Jones
rescued
right now.
and is, rescued from the dragon by
Mhm.
a prince. This is just showing us, who Jesus is. And I kind of laughed. This is a little bit of an off thing, but with the most recent Encanto, which I enjoyed, Disney's,
Mhm.
Encanto. But who is the villain? The grandmother who does not make you feel completely fulfilled and validated. It's like Disney doesn't
Mm.
believe that evil actually exists anymore. But the older
Yeah.
fairy tales, they do tell that story.
Yeah.
So I think that's, yeah, keep going,
Do you want
Hillary.
to add to that one of the things that some kids will do is if they see that kind of romance in the movies and they're not seeing that in their own home with their parents, it could be something that they're longing for. But there is something like Katie Faust, her book Them Before Us talks about the power of having a biological mom and a biological dad
Mm.
that are in the house, that there's this sense of safety and security that a child will feel by seeing their parents snuggling on the couch or holding hands, or maybe a quick kiss now and then. You don't want to make out in front of your kids, but like these little acts of romance and love like that, there's feeling
Mm.
of security that it gives kids that they will never feel if it's their mom and their stepdad or their dad and their stepmom. There's just
Mhm.
something different about that biological mom and dad. And again, we don't want to say, well, if you're a blended family, then too bad. God redeems all situations. I would say
Mhm.
that Jew and Gentile, we are the original blended family, and God has good purposes for that. But I think it is worth trying to do that if you are with your biological spouse in your house with your kids, to pay attention if they're really drawn to those romances, finding ways, innocuous ways that you can show that romance to your kids
Mm.
between you and your spouse.
Yeah, good advice. We're gonna try to get through two more, and then we're gonna
Okay.
call it a day. So next question says, by protecting our kids well, are we putting them in danger of being aroused too easily? Most people who watch non-Christian TV shows today are somewhat desensitized to the porn that pervades all of society. If we hide these things, do we increase the allure when they finally do see it?
I'll let you
So
go
this is,
first.
yeah. So this is one where, again, I want to think of, okay, what is the question
Mhm.
behind the question? So the
Yeah.
question is, are we putting them in harm's way by protecting them from this completely? If we monitored them so closely so that they could never ever see anything of the world, and we kept them, which I obviously don't recommend, kept them locked up, kept them completely off the grid, never even told them that this existed, that would put them in harm's way. That would
Yes.
be very, very dangerous, because it would be like the parent who shelters his or her child from all germs. And then one day
Mhm.
when they get out in the world, their immune system is going to be so weak because they have never had a chance to build up tolerance to anything.
Yeah.
When we are talking with our children about these things, we are helping build up their immunity to being addicted to these
Yeah.
things. So we are actually building up their immune system. Talking physiologically, are they probably going to be aroused a lot more easily when they see sexually stimulating content? Yes. And that's a good thing. Not that they're
Yep.
being aroused, but the fact that something so easy can arouse them. I mean, don't we want them when they are married one day to see their wife or to see their husband walking around naked and to be very easily aroused? Don't we want that? Yes, we want that. And so if we are being intentional about having these conversations, checking in with our kids, making sure that they feel safe with us, they understand that their heart is safe with us, we are actually building up their immune system to these things. And the fact that they're protected from them and then will be more easily aroused when they accidentally bump into these things one day, that's a good thing, because then we've also prepared them with the escape route. So that would be my response.
And I would say to that you're also dealing with, you're discipling them along the way how to prevent themselves from lingering too much on things. That if they are never taught how to be in the presence of something that's ungodly and to not linger on it and redirect their attention, like, can't remember what book it was. It might be Wild at Heart, The Bounce Method. And I still see my husband do this. You know, the woman walk around, you just immediately see him go like that. If she's scantily dressed, or if we're, you know, watching a movie and someone, I think he and I both do that. Someone's naked. We're both like, just learning how to be in the world and not of the world, and not taking that stuff in. That if you're never exposed to that, you know what your reaction is going to be the first time you see it? Like staring at it and they're like, I can't look away. It's like a it's like a car wreck. And so we're teaching them how to be responsible in the midst of being in the world.
Yep. Okay, final question we're going to cover today.
Yes.
As someone who is recovering from a porn addiction, how open should I be with my children? Thanks for asking this question. I think it's an important one. I think this really depends on the age of your children. You know, if you're talking with a 5-year-old, yes. Yep. If you're not going to be you're not going to be super blunt with your 5-year-old, you know, you might be a little bit more open with your 15-year-old. So like Hillary said, I think it really depends on their personality. So pray and ask God to give you wisdom. Those who are walking alongside of you in recovery from this, ask them for wisdom as well. Because, you know, Hillary and I, we don't know you, you know, so we don't know your children either. So we can't offer the best advice for your situation, but those in your local body of Christ who know you, who know your children, who know your family, you know, they can offer more sound counsel also, and what the focus should be on, you know, anything that you're sharing with your kids is, you know, this is something that I have struggled with. And, you know, like it was really harmful to me and to your dad, or to me and to your mom. And I don't want you to get harmed in the same way. So this is why we are going to this. I don't think you need to go into lots of detail about all the different types of pornography you were involved in. I don't think you need to go, you know, into the detail about the depths, but just why you're sharing it with them, so that they can know that this is something that you have struggled with. You've seen how harmful it is, and you want to protect them from the same pitfalls that you have fallen into.
And while they are in your house, I would not bring up all the ways that it harmed your marriage, because that is going to bring around a lot of insecurity, and that's stuff that goes on in y'all's bedroom and your kids, that they should not need to shoulder that. But I like the way Elizabeth phrased it. Just, this is something I have struggled with, and these are the ways that I had to get around it. But yeah, if it's like, well, your father and I couldn't have sex for a really long time. If they're like in their late 20s or 30s and maybe they're married or something like that, that would be an appropriate time. And also knowing their personality. Is this a personality of kid who, when they get mad, they throw stuff back in your face? Maybe that's not the kind of kid that you want to bare your soul like that to. If they're going to use it as a weapon against you later. And there's some kids that would never do that are just like, I'm so honored that you would share that with me. And then there are some kids that, you know, are going to whip that out the next time they get mad at you. So just being very wise and savvy, and always realize that you can always put it in a third person of like, I personally know someone who has struggled with this, and these were some of the things that happened in their life. They don't have to know you're talking about yourself, but it puts a real life personality. This is someone who exists in our vicinity that has struggled with this, and here's what they found helpful.
Yep, I think that's great advice. Well, thank you all for hanging with us today for this session on porn proofing our kids. And with all that we've covered, I know that there can be a lot of fear that can be felt, but would just really encourage you as you walk away from here, just be very prayerful about, what type of fear are you feeling? Are you feeling a healthy God honoring fear of knowing this is a big thing in our society? This is a real danger to my children. And I'm going to do, all that God has empowered me to do to help them avoid this temptation and also to leave them ultimately in his hands? Or is it the type of fear where you're just paralyzed, the ungodly fear where Satan is, overwhelming you with, your kids are going to fall, you're never going to be able to do this? Really just discern what type of fear you're feeling, because there is a healthy God honoring fear where you're actually trusting the Lord in this. And I know for both Hillary and for myself, it's our prayer, that that's the type of fear you would walk away with, a fear of the Lord. So thank you again, Hillary, for joining me today.
Absolutely.
And everyone, we'll see you next time.